Revolution. 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake was slain of men 7,000. We have the number 7 again. So this has to do with this battle between the divinity and the counterfeit divinity. The storming of the Bastille, one of the great events of our time, and what did they do? They enthroned the goddess of liberty. And this is history. There she was. They took a prostitute, they enthroned her, and they fell on their feet. They mocked, in other words. They fell on their knees and they worshipped the goddess of liberty. And they took everything that stood for the kings and the mighty ones and the rulers, and they got rid of them. And there are the heads of the kings, Louis XVI and his wife. Here's the beheading of Louis XVI and the beheading of Marie Antoinette. And there is her head. They held it on a stick and showed it to the people. And there was great merriment and great rejoicing, and gifts were sent to each other precisely as it was told. Now, who was behind this French Revolution, and what is the French Revolution all about? It's taking away from those that ruled and governed and giving it to the people, but in actual fact the people were just being used as Pike states, and as Masonry in its higher order states, as human herds, used to do the will of the higher fraternity. Now the men behind it were Robespierre, and he was the head of the Jacobins, the Jacobin clubs. Now what were the Jacobins? The Jacobins were like secret clubs. All the symbols of the Jacobins are identical to the symbols of Freemasonry. And you know the duck story, I'm not going to repeat it again, but that's what they were. All the symbols were exactly the same. The Jacobins formed the think tanks, the political parties today. Today you would have equal or similar Jacobin clubs that are set up in the form of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers. Those would be the equivalent of the Jacobins of those days. Then, another man that was very prominent at that time was Voltaire. To hold a pen is to be at war, Voltaire. And Voltaire, of course, was a Jesuit. And the head of the Illuminati, or the founder of the Illuminati, was Weishaupt. He was professor at the University, Ingolstadt. He was a Jesuit. Now, if you look at the history books, they will tell you that these were ex-Jesuit because they turned against the church. Well, that's exactly what they want you to believe. That's exactly what they want you to believe, because this plan was worked out in great detail. The idea was to put an end, give a so-called mortal wound to the papacy, so that the suspicion would be removed, and put the power into the Jacobin societies, which would rule without anyone knowing that it was actually the same system having gone underground pretending to be dead. And so they had to pretend to give the beast a mortal wound, and the Jesuits were the ones that did it. You saw the Jesuit promise they will do anything, whatever it takes, in order to further the Mother Church. The Pope was taken into exile. I'm sure he was taken well care of. The fact that he died in exile is neither here nor there. He just happened to die in exile. But he lived a life of luxury. If the fact that many of the prominent men thereafter went into exile is also neither here nor there. Let's take a modern day example. You've all heard of Idi Amin, right? The greatest mass murderer in Africa for many a century. Where is he today? Living in luxury in Saudi Arabia, in exile. See? Big deal. All right. There is Voltaire. So he supposedly turned against the church. He's listed in your encyclopedia, look up anyone, as a Jesuit. And they will say, he must be an ex-one because he went against Roman Catholicism. What about Jean-Jacques Rousseau? the social contract, man is born free and everywhere he's in chains. One man thinks himself the master of others, but remains more of a slave than they are. So Voltaire and all of these people, they came together, the Illuminati, and they planned the new constitution for the world. And this new constitution would put the so-called power in the hands of the people. Now, in the USSR, was the power in the hands of the people, or were the so-called people with the power in their hands ruled with an iron thumb, iron fist? What was the case? They only appeared to have the power with the people, but the people were being used as gun fodder, as human hordes. Now, what they decided was to set up a new Bill of Rights for the humankind, and they called it the original Human Rights Declaration of the French Revolution. Human rights. Now, human rights sound great. Today, if we listen to the politicians of the world, what do we hear? The law of God, or do we hear human rights? We hear human rights. Human rights have been enthroned as the law of nations. Now, human rights sound great, and if you read them, they make a lot of sense. But if you read them carefully, there's the sting of death in them. Did you know that? Because in actual fact, they are not God's way of giving you liberty, but they entrench certain counterfeit measures which are against the law of God. Now, the arrogance of it, that the French Revolution brought them out in the form, this form that you see here. That was the original declaration, and it came out on 2 tablets of stone. Is that not interesting? Aha! Now the question we have to ask ourselves is, whose human rights are these? Are they something that we should be very proud of, or do they come from another source? Well, again, the symbolism will help us. At the top you saw there was the triangle with the all-seeing eye. Who does that represent? Represents Osiris. The declaration, and then you have the serpent with a tail in his mouth. Now, who is that? That's a symbol of Lucifer, the life-giving serpent, and a very prominent symbol in occultism. And you have the freedom from the chains over here, and you have all this interesting symbolism, and then you have this funny little hat there. Did you see that? Now, this funny little hat was the hat of the Jacobins. So the Jacobins, the leaders, and then finally the revolutionaries of France, they all wore the little Jacobin hat. It's cute, eh? Now the question is, what does the Jacobin hat represent, and who does it represent? And when you donned it, under whose authority did you stand? Well, let's have a look a little further. You'll make it large for you. You can see it all very nicely. There it is, the little Jacobin hat, the serpent with a tail in the mouth. There they are. And above all, the all-seeing eye of Osiris, Lucifer. Lucifer is in charge of the Human Rights Declaration. And what is the Jacobin hat? Well, let me take you to the British Museum, where we have the god Mitra. And he is killing the bull, and helping him is the dog and the snake and the scorpion with its sting back there. And let's go to the side of Mitra and examine what's on his head. Oops! Do you see that? The Jacobin hat is the symbol of Mitra. That is Mitraism. And the god of Roman Catholicism, because the very system of Roman Catholicism is Mitraism. So the whole of the French Revolution and the Declaration of Human Rights was under the auspices of Mitraism. Now, the first Charter of the Rights of Nations came by Cyrus the Great, and when my soldiers in great numbers peacefully entered Babylon, I did not allow anyone to terrorize the people. I kept in view the needs of the people, the sanctuaries. I put an end to their misfortune and their slavery. Do you know an organization today that tries to bring about the image that this is exactly what they do? The United Nations, when they go into an area, they allow the turmoil to continue until the problem has been resolved. Then they go in and then they act this role. So this mortal wound that the papacy received in 1798, Pope Pius, when he was dethroned by Napoleon, his ring was torn off. By 1804, Pope Pius VII witnessed Napoleon crown himself emperor. Napoleon took the Vatican States. Mazzini attacks Rome, and Pope Pius is exiled. He's restored in 1850, but he had lost the Papal States. And what did Napoleon do? The first thing Napoleon does is he returns and he declares religious freedom. And he sets everyone free that had previously been suppressed by Roman Catholicism. And this is a picture of Napoleon reinstating the Jewish religion and the Jews bowing down at his feet, thanking him for his kindness and generosity. And so the heat is off, the beast is dead, and now everything is in the hands of the people. But behind it all is the serpent, controlling the issues. So we have more violence than the world had experienced to that time. Joseph Bonaparte, 1768, King of Spain, and this comes from a Masonic book. And what does it tell us about him? It tells us that he was a high Freemason, and that he was actually the Großmeister, the worshipful master of the Oriental lodges. Now his brother, of course, Napoleon Bonaparte, same thing. So Napoleon enters and does whatever it is necessary to unite Europe and to rid Europe of that which is problematic. So giving the power to the people. Finally, he loses the battle at Waterloo and he is stopped. So we have the role of Britain in terms of ensuring freedom growing. Now let's have a look at that War of Waterloo, and we look at the role players. Well, Wellington was the one who fought on the one side, Napoleon on the other, and on the one side you had Michel Ney, here he is, on the French side, and you had von Grouchy on the French side, and both of them were high Freemasons, as well as Napoleon, and his brother, as you saw, was even the Grand Master of the Oriental Lodges. On the other side, you had this German fellow, Blücher, and then you had von Schnarrenhorst, and they were high Freemasons. Now, isn't that interesting? So you have all of the major role players in this war being top Freemasons. Now, they are a sworn brotherhood, sworn under oath to stick together and hold together and build each other. So they set up this war, they bring about the conflagration, and then they achieve what they want to do, the new state, and then the so-called perpetrators are no more. The ones who did it all, who caused the damage, the Napoleons, who did all these terrible things in the end, they're taken away into exile, removed from the dangerous situation. Everything has been achieved just as they wanted it. So you have good cop, bad cop. You remove the good cop, you place the bad cop, you put the good cop in place. You make that one bad, then you replace him with another good cop. Well, then comes the First World War to again take issues a little bit further. Kaiser Wilhelm. Now, this is an interesting picture. What does this tell you about Kaiser Wilhelm? Oh yes, this comes from a Masonic book. They're very proud of it, that every single king was a high Mason. And every emperor there was a high Mason. So there you have one. That after this French Revolution period, there were only Masons in control. In the whole of Britain, there were only Masons in control. In the whole of Europe, that's where they ruled. Here's Kaiser Friedrich III. What is he wearing? Masonic regalia. They are all Freemasons. So on both sides of the fence, you have Freemasonry. 1854, Pius proclaims the Immaculate Conception of Mary. And he summons the First Vatican Council in 1870 and the dogma of infallibility, and ultramontanism triumphs, the Pope is raised up to the level where all